Okay, guys, I love talking to entrepreneurs, and today is another incredible co-founder of an amazing startup, ClassHook. Now, I already know Alex from way back. We've been friends, and every time I speak to him, dude's always got some gems for me. But today, I'm on a journey to learn new stuff because he's never been on a podcast with me. And so, Alex, thank you so much, man, for taking some time off today and joining me and hanging out with me one more time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
That's amazing, bro. You always make time for me. And obviously today, we're not talking shop like we typically do. We're going to talk about how we can help others that are crazy enough to want to do the things that we are doing. So I always like to start off with the founders just giving, their 30-second elevator pitch. Let's start with that.
Yeah, about the company.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm leading ClassHook. ClassHook is a K-12 ed tech company that helps educators bring in popular TV shows and movies into their lessons. So you can teach with The Simpsons, The Office, Moana, Frozen, whatever show or movie you like. You could easily find the content on ClassHook and then use that interactively in discussions with students. So no more searching for hours and hours and hours on YouTube and Google only to find content your students are just going to be bored with. You can come to ClassHook instead.
That's great. That's what we call a proven effective pitch, my guy. Well
Thanks.
rehearsed. Thank you for that. Talk to us a little bit about your target audience. Who is this company designed to help?
Yeah, we're designed to help K-12 teachers, mostly middle school and high school, but we do serve all K-12. So teachers who are either new and they don't have many resources, they're looking to bring new materials into the class to be, the cool teacher, right, to relate to the students, or even more seasoned educators come to ClassHook because they need to liven up their curriculum or teach something in a new way to connect with newer generations of kids. And they don't know the same shows and movies and content that the kids know. So classic is a great bridge between those generations.
That's awesome. Making teachers cool. So obviously, founders who get into startup, there's usually a trigger point, something that says, you know what, I need to do something, and my outlet is going to be this company. What sort of triggered you to want to get on this journey to bring ClassHook to the world?
Yeah, great question. Trigger event was actually when I graduated from my undergrad studies. So I went to Babson College. It's known for its entrepreneurship program, so I wanted to start something. But I looked at my education up until my graduation, starting from elementary all the way through, right? And I grew up in New York, public schools in New York. So, you know, pretty okay educational experience, not the worst, not the best, but decent. And so I looked at kind of what points were most memorable, what teaching moments were most memorable for me, right? And then why were they most memorable? And how could we create more memorable learning experiences for students? Because when I really felt empowerment from learning. It's the pathway for people to get out of poverty and for people to advance in their lives. And so I wanted to help other people really learn in ways that are more effective for them. And so looking back, I scattered through my brain and I found that it was the teachers were using relevant content that really resonated with me and something that I can connect to, something that I felt that was interesting or connected with my interests. And so um, that was kind of what led to the idea of like starting something to help more educators connect with their students. And then just one other piece there is I remember when my teachers would roll out the TV cart and then show a movie. That was the most exciting day of the week, right? And so how could we create that TV cart experience for people in kind of the modern age?
Right.
And if you're a little bit younger listening to this, they might not have TV carts anymore, but they
Yeah.
used to have these big TV carts and put in the VHS or the DVD.
Man, I love that. Did you find it confusing in the early days in getting that clarity where when I listen to you, I would interpret it as you're trying to make the idea of learning more fun for the kids. If I were to pitch it, but you've got the focus from a teacher perspective, and you and I talk about it all the time. Sales and marketing and branding really is much easier when you have clarity, and
Mhm.
in your classroom model. Maybe you can walk us through some of the early sort of experiments in messaging. Was there any major pivots that came out of it to where you are today on a 30-second pitch?
Yeah, great question. So on a 30-second pitch, first thing is talk to people, don't build anything. Before we built anything, I scheduled calls with 50 teachers to talk
Wow.
about what we're doing, just learn about their lesson planning process, because we had a hunch that this would be used by professors or teachers. And so I went to my old college professors, I talked to them about content and how they're relating to students, and how do they go about their lesson planning. I don't have a background in education, so I didn't know about the process. So after speaking to 50, some patterns came to emerge. It was that one, it took too long to find content, so they were going on Google, YouTube, and all these other platforms that have educational content but are not designed for educators. And then
Hmm.
the other pattern was that the the type of content that they want to find is not easily accessible, and they want to find content that's relevant to the students, that students are really going to get invested in and engaged in. And when you go to YouTube, when you search, photosynthesis science, some boring video of someone talking in your face the whole time
Right.
is going to be there, and students don't want to watch that for 20 minutes. They want to watch like a
Yeah.
short snippet. And so those were a few insights that came about. But the thing is, in those initial user interviews with teachers, we didn't bias them in any way, right? I asked open-ended questions, understanding their process. Then, if it seemed like it made sense near the end of it, I would ask them, "Hey, I'm working on something. Can I pick your brain and get your feedback?" And so that's when I would give the pitch. And then through all those interviews, I refined the pitch and explained it in a way that's more clear, because
Hmm.
obviously it was very jumbled. Like, we're building some website with databases of videos. It's like it's not clear, And so over time that also does change too as you talk to
Right.
more people. But yeah, so
How much of
the more
that was because you went through entrepreneurship as an ecosystem where you studied or any formal training? Because what I love what you just said is user interviews, right? But I
Mhm.
find most entrepreneurs get stuck on that first step of, oh, I need to speak to 20, 30, 50 people. Either just they're nervous about, sort of calling people and trying to get their attention, or two, this imposter syndrome that what if I tell somebody what I'm doing and there's shit all over it? And how did you in the early days um, sort of get that muscle trained to reach out to 50 people, have these conversations? Did you have any tips, tricks that made it easier?
Yeah, I think that the thing is make don't tie your personal value to your startup, right? It's like they shit on the idea, as you said, right? And it's not a reflection of you. It's just the idea. And if you consider ideas malleable, they can change, they can form in different ways. And maybe you can just scrap them too, right? If you think about ideas in that way, then it makes it much easier. Also, things I've heard is to have multiple ideas. So we have a few variations of this thing that we think might be interesting to build. Let's run it by some people, and then you know, we'll narrow them down until we find the one that is really valuable. That shifts your mindset on my idea is not good to which idea is the best.
That's a great point. Take the idea and the emotion, the personality, and separate it. Because your job is to figure out the best idea, and it doesn't necessarily mean you are not that good. It's just you haven't figured out the right idea yet. And I went through the same thing. I'm like, what the hell is
Yeah.
Schoolio? Are we a kindergarten? Are we a school? Are we an online platform? Are we,
Yeah.
and like you, I'm like, I'm gonna talk to everybody who will listen to me because I never know what they're gonna say or maybe not say. Because sometimes the opposite happens, and somebody goes, "This is brilliant. Has nobody
Mhm.
thought of this?" And you're like, "Oh yes, this is equally as important as somebody who shits on it." So you went through this, process of meeting some people, got some feedback. Now you're also a coder, so you can get your hands
Yes.
dirty and start doing things. But at some point, there's a bunch of options on what do I do with this business. I can self-fund it. I can do a friends and family round. I can take a loan from the bank and start working on it. I could try to raise some money. Um, is that a conscious thought you went through, or how did your next step happen?
Yeah, great question. So, we didn't think much about that. We probably should have, but I was working a full-time job, so on the side I was working on it, and it's basically testing if you can work on this on the side. If you can, that's great, right? You can test the potential of it, in a lower risk environment. And
Right.
then once it starts to take off more, then maybe it makes sense to leave your job and go full time and figure out how to fund it. But we really started it actually for impact. We didn't even have a business model or anything. We just wanted it to be available for free to everyone. And then obviously reality sets in a little bit later through the journey. So definitely encourage you to think about your business model, but the main thing is what problems are we solving, right? Focus on that
Mm,
problem and then how you're solving that for users, and your potential customers, and that's most important because that will define how you price your product, how you build it, and then
right.
ultimately how you fund it.
No, I love that, man. And along the way, and I mean, I think you said you wanted impact, so you made this thing free in the beginning. um, I wanted to see if customers will buy our product because I'm selling to parents. And so my aha moment was we launched our website and launched our store. And I
Hmm.
think within 6 hours, we had our first digital purchase for
Wow.
$115 or something. And I was over the moon. I'm like, oh my gosh, somebody just went onto the site, purchased the product, put a credit card in. Like, this is legit. And then
Yeah.
I'm waiting to see if there's a refund request coming in, a chargeback coming in, or are they
It's not
gonna,
a scam.
badmouth us on Facebook that they bought some shit? But in your world, what was some early successes look like where you're like, okay, I want to keep going?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, because it is hard, right? Some in the beginning, nothing's happening, and you're making
Yeah.
everything happen, and it's like it seemed like, what's going on? What do I do with my life? What do I do to progress this?
What
And
am I
so,
doing in my life?
you know what I mean, right? Yeah, my life that becomes a startup. And so, um, the moments for me were actually I wanted to get some awareness around it, and so I have no idea how. Don't explain to me. Somehow we had a bunch of people from India coming to the website, and I'm like, what is going on? So like we tried to do all the backtracking in Google and figure it out, and then some newspaper like written in Tamil was like mentioned us in like one page. I actually went on their site, looked up the newspaper, and then like searched through all the pages to try to find it, and it was there. It was like it was really bad. It had our it had like our website image like very badly misformed. You know how you have like an image and it's so stretched out or whatever. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
how is this newspaper quality? First off, anyway, second, I have no idea how they found out about our website, but they did. And so for me, I'm like, oh, well, if some newspaper in India finds us, then that's a good sign, I guess. Right? um, so there's potential here, there's potential. And then I reached out to a bunch of edtech bloggers and I just said, hey, this is what we're working on. Would love it if you could feature us. And then actually, there's a big edtech blog called Free Tech for Teachers, right, by Richard Burns, and he featured us. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. One, because we got a bunch of users, and two, there's a lot of potential. So um, I guess that awareness and the fact that there are more people who seem to find value in it was really
Mm.
a point for me that it was a good validation point.
That's amazing. Listen, as an Indian and also somebody who fluently speaks Tamil, I'm so happy that my people were in the origin stories of your company, which
They
is
were.
awesome. Which is awesome. So the next big thing, we look at is sort of companies growing. You're starting to now figure out what the model is and making some mistakes along the way. Looking back, is there a mistake that you wish you're like, man, I wish I can go back in time and not make that mistake.
Yeah, I mean, big mistake we made was waiting too long to really understand how people are using the platform. So we're a freemium model, right? So we have, and it's a B2C to B business model. So we sell to teachers, try to get the engagement from the teachers, and then sell to the schools because the teachers love it. So um, we had Google Analytics, and for the longest time we were using that and just like logging events in it. But Google Analytics is there's a new version now that's good, but the older version was like it's literally like I would just go through Google Analytics, look at the events, and just like see some text, and it's like, okay, great, and then I would actually sometimes take that into an Excel and then like make a chart, but that's not like a good way to measure your traffic. I needed a actual platform, something like that we used Mixpanel, right, to actually measure usage and get to product market fit. Because Google Analytics is the wrong tool. So we were using the wrong tool for the longest time, trying to get to product market fit. And so that was a huge mistake. If I knew that earlier, I would have used Mixpanel, and I think we would have figured out a lot of things and insights much sooner.
Man, we're gonna have to have an offline check. So I just canceled our mixed panel subscription because I don't know what the hell was in there and what data was making sense. I was like, listen, we're just gonna build our own dashboard where I have more control over the data. I can actually see what's coming in and coming out. I can find two kid. But literally last week, we're like, we're
Yeah.
gonna cancel the subscription and
Wow.
then do something on our own. So I might have to revisit that. Thank you for that. Might be
Yeah.
one of my bad decisions that I'm gonna explain in the podcast in a year from now. Um, when you look at the category, ed tech has always been around, but through the pandemic, a lot of noise around ed tech, right? Rightfully so.
Yeah.
And I feel like the noise is starting to come down a little bit as like the sort of fly by seat. I'm trying to be polite about it. I know some people in the category. The startups that didn't really have a purpose other than just being there for COVID are starting to die down, and
Yeah.
some of the real companies like you are now starting to sort of create the space again. How would you describe ed tech as a category?
I think as a category, I think that's a really big question, but I would start by describing it as ideally, essentially, EdTech is a way to improve instruction, right? Improve learning in the U.S. and in every country, actually, right? The purpose of EdTech is to help create efficiencies. It's to help um, save time, of course, which comes with efficiencies. It's to help get better assessments of student performance. And so, the one thing I like about EdTech is we're all focused on improving student outcomes. That's really like the goal of EdTech, whether it's helping administrators save money and time with things on managing their finances, or it's like Schoolio, where you have a hole-in-one curriculum that helps teachers and homeschoolers teach. It's really all in that purpose of serving students. So that's one thing I like about tech. To describe the category, I would say it is really a support, right? A
Mm,
lot of ed tech is not. There's no ed tech that is replacing a teacher and fundamentally reshaping education, right? Khan
right.
Academy, you could say, is one model because it helps people learn from anywhere, but that's still not reshaping education. And
Yeah.
so when people come in and say we're going to revolutionize education, I feel like they don't really have a full grasp on what it really means to actually do that. And also, they don't have a good understanding of the space. But unlike other industries where you could come in with some new technology and revolutionize it, edtech is still very people centered because it deals with students and it deals with
Exactly.
education. So that's like the best way I could
No, I think it's well put,
generalize the whole
man.
space.
Because
Yeah,
we struggled with it in the early days, especially when we went meeting investors and everybody wanted that industry shaking idea. What is the one thing that's going to change everything? And I said, you can't change anything. Um, to at the core because there's still people teaching young people, and young people have now got many different ways their attention has to be differentiated and understood. So we can
yeah,
change learning models, we can change delivery, we can change measurement and efficacy, but nobody's gonna, like, we're not gonna have the Uber of education show up one day and everything is sort of pushed to the side. But
yeah.
that also begs this, a second question of edtech is the least funded category from an investment perspective too. So why do you think? I mean, we're both in the business of trying to raise money and do what we're trying to do, but like, if there's one category that's going to change the world, that's going to help
Mhm.
humanity move forward, that's going to bring people to a baseline with knowledge and critical thinking, is
Yeah,
education. So
that's
why do
true.
you think there's a hesitation in edtech funding? Just curious.
Yeah, I mean, there's a discrepancy, right, in terms of the purpose of education and what investors want. Right? Investors want a big return, and education is really for social good, right? Social impact on people. You're not, unless you're, I guess, a private school, your goal is not to make tons of money. I don't think that's why most people enter the space. It's to make impact on people and especially young people in their lives. So investors understand the good tech investors understand that most of the money is made in selling to K-12 schools and districts, which is fundamentally selling to the government, which
Mm-hmm.
is not usually the easiest thing, right? It takes a long time. Sales cycles, especially selling to districts, are long. It's hard. It's a very saturated market, and selling to teachers works, but if you consider the pool, the amount of spending that goes into each of the different stakeholders in education, about 4% of all spending is from teachers. So you're only going to get
Mm,
so far just doing a direct to consumer model. So you need to go B2B eventually and sell to schools. And so that's just historically been a very tough process. A lot of cold outbound, cold outreach, trying to get district decision makers' attention. Then you got to go through the red tape of applying for RFPs if it's within a certain budget item, and all that stuff. And so it's just not very attractive from an investor standpoint. They want someone to
right.
become a unicorn and make 10x on their return. If you're talking about venture capital, and edtech is, if you even look back in history, not many edtech companies actually IPO. Right, the most likely outcome is an acquisition or a merger,
Right.
and that's great, but that's maybe not the return investors want. So I think all those factors combined make it not super attractive
Yeah.
for many investors.
Yeah. It almost feels like education is the one category where customers and crowdfunding should be heavily relied on because we're ultimately impacting the lives of the kids of the parents who we support, and so maybe
Yeah.
there's something there as a messaging. But one of the things I love, man, and I've been a serial entrepreneur since my first startup way back, is what changes I've gone through as a human, right?
Yeah.
And many of it is forced through growing companies. And
Mhm.
I've never had a job, so I always wonder, if I could go back and look at who I was and mapped out all the companies and how each company made me become a different person. It would be a beautiful, narrative of who I am today because of those entrepreneurship opportunities. When you
Yeah.
look at ClassHook as an entity, 6 years old, 7 years old. How old are you guys?
We're 9 years old. I mean,
Nine years old.
I mean, from idea to now, I guess technically we're about like 7 years old. Yeah.
That's still good, man. That's still most
Yeah.
companies don't make it past five. Shit, I'm in year four. I just want to beat the statistics, you know. But
You will.
when I look at like the human transformation, I'm curious. How have you seen just you as an individual? 'Cause I met you a couple years ago, a year ago, or just a little bit
Yeah.
over than that. So I've always seen you as this like extrovert but introvert smart, founder who's very analytical versus my like daydreamy version of running the company. But I'm wondering how you reflect yourself.
Yeah, I mean, being an entrepreneur is the best learning experience you can have. You have to learn a lot about a bunch of different things and even things you're not comfortable with. So I'm actually like an introvert at heart. I've had to learn to become more extroverted, like when I need to, right? When I'm talking to the team, when I'm pitching investors or talking to customers on sales calls, or on a podcast like this, that I would not have gotten anywhere near any of these experiences if I had not become an entrepreneur and done my own thing. So I think one is teach taught me to go outside my comfort zone and be comfortable doing that, even if I'm uncomfortable with something. I go ahead and do it now. That applies a lot to like travel. I do a lot of international travel, so I'm like, oh, let's go to this country. I'm not sure if I'm like, oh, I'm not sure. Then it's like, oh, well, just go. I'll figure it out, right? And then you do learn how to improvise really well too, because you're figuring things out on the fly. Like I don't have formal sales training. I don't have formal experience in education. I've had to learn very quickly, and then and apply those skills to whatever I'm doing for the work. I've gotten more management experience. I haven't had a full time job where I served in the role of a manager, and so being able to talk to people, convince people, right, influence people in good ways, of course, are really valuable skills. And then Satish is I don't know if you're naturally that kind of guy, but you're very visionary, right? And you could explain the 10,000 foot, 30,000 foot vision, and that's something I'm not good at. I'm a very meticulous kind of guy, and I've had to learn how to get better at conveying the vision so that you could convince people and influence people, because part of your job as a founder is to get people to join the team or to convince investors, and so you
Hmm.
need to have those skills. So I've learned a lot about
Yeah.
it's a lot of like people skills, a lot of people skills really.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head, and that was going to be my lead up question to you. Where when I meet all these founders, the one thing I try to get across to them is what is the number one job in reality as a founder? not the sexy incubator version, the accelerator version, not the classes that teach you entrepreneurship. In your opinion, what is the number one job you have every single day?
Is to make sure the company doesn't die. Like that's your responsibility as as CEO, right? You have to make sure the company's still around. Um, and that can mean a lot of different things, but yeah, that's basically
Yeah.
your job.
Yeah, and to your point, my number one job is the storytelling. Of all the things that I can outsource, the one thing I cannot outsource is exciting the universe about why Schoolio needs to be here and why we're a perfect need for the market and why
Mm,
we are the company to solve this problem. And that's my job every single day. And the more I do that, the more we win. The more I do things that I'm trained to do, operations, finance, legal, sales, marketing, team building, all of these things that I'm trained to do, we don't grow as much because the one thing I must do. And most founders resist that one job. They want to code or they want to do the
mm.
operational stuff, and they're not out there putting themselves out. I see just from watching you over the last year or so that you're a lot more vocal now, sharing content and engaging people on LinkedIn and stuff. Where do you see that outward sort of brand building exercise that you have to do? Is that a daily conscious thing, or is it a strategic thing you do?
Yeah, I think for me, actually, it needs to be a little more intentional. I know it's they say building in public, right, is a great thing to do, and I think it is because it makes people aware of what you're doing, and then it builds not only awareness, but it builds like you get fans, potential customers, people who want to support your mission any way they can, and I think that transparency creates a lot of trust with people, and so you yourself become the face of the brand, right, and so then you use that to your advantage to broadcast your mission or to sell to clients and all that. So for me, it's something I want to be doing more intentionally. I'm again a very more reserved person, but I want to do at least like a few times a week, post about what we're doing, and it's not just hey, this is what ClassHook does. It's more of like conveying that story, right? Teachers spend so much time finding content, and it doesn't have to be that way. Here's what they can do
Yeah.
instead, things like that.
I
So
love that, man. I love that. So we're getting to our last segment, but I don't want you to give away the secret sauce in the last one because that's your IP. But one of the
sure.
things that people are stuck on is how do I sell? There's a fear of selling, but there's a love of money and growth and traction. So, of all the different things you guys have tried, and for me, sales doesn't necessarily mean revenue. It just means customers that are now getting in line to be in your funnel or converting, whether to free or paid
Mm.
or whatever it is. But I'm curious if there's a tool or a tactic that you could share with our listeners that have helped you win some market share.
Yeah, great question. Sales really comes down to helping people and value, right? It's a lot of people think about sales as like, oh, I have to act a certain way, I have to do certain things, and then like they'll buy. It's like really how do you find fit with what their problems are and what your solution offers, and then how do you just move the conversation along in a way that gets people to buy, right? So you don't lose them. So, um, it's important to understand like really understand what are the problems that you solve and then how can you solve those really effectively and then why should they partner with you instead of maybe some other company. If you can nail those three, you're already well ahead of a lot of people who want a lot of entrepreneurs who want to just do sales. A tool that we can use, so in the early days, you're no one's going to know about you, and so you have to put yourself out there, and so we use apollo.io to do sales automation and sales outreach, so you can set up these sequences of emails, right? And then you can find contacts there and you can email them and get in touch about what you're doing. And that could be your potential customer. For us, that's like a school principal or a department chair at an
Hmm.
ELA department chair. Yeah. And so um, just putting yourself out there. And in the really early days, even like maybe a year after we launched, we sent out these long emails to like we found a list of a bunch of principals, and we just like honestly wrote like, "Hey, this is my name is Alex, and I set out to build a project like this. It was actually a very long email, but we did get some responses from people, and they're like, "Oh, congrats, keep up the good work," or it's like, "Oh, like I'm actually interested in learning a bit more about this." And the market was very different back then, 2016, 2017 than it is now. But still, people like to hear those stories, right?
Hmm. No, I love that. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up because I want this to be super impactful. And if you've been
Sure.
listening to Alex and I chit chat up to now, you must have a shit ton of notes already because I know there's been dropping some bombs on here. Mental health, let's talk about that quickly because entrepreneurship is one of the loneliest jobs you can get. In fact, I still tell people do not take this role on if you can. If you can get a job or if you can work for somebody else or find a co founder first, this is a lonely ass job.
It is.
Highs are high, lows are low. How do you deal with mental health? What support systems have you built around you to help pick you up?
Great. Yeah, amazing question. And it's something every founder should be thinking about before and while they're working in their own company, right? It's so some support systems, some things that help me. One, I like to meditate. So I set time to meditate. Just relaxes you. You have so much going on every day in all different areas, whether it's customers or fundraising or product or whatever, right? And you need to just like reset. So I set meditation, 15 minutes, 30 minutes in the middle of the day, and I just do it. And actually recently have been a little skipping it, but I have to get back into it. But
Right after this
just
call, you got to do it.
yeah, I'll do it right after this call. Yeah. So just do it. You need to reset your brain. It's too much stress to be going to meeting and just working all the time. The second one is I used to be super workaholic when I started. Still am workaholic, but there's more balance now. Before it was like work, 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 right? Now I make time to have like a social life, go out with friends, have some fun. There's nothing wrong with relaxing, right? You're ready and eager to get working during the week if you've had a good weekend to refresh. So it's a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. So acknowledging that, making intentional time for rest and relaxation is super important. So those are a couple of things that I do. In terms of dealing with the highs and the lows, I like to take a step back when they're highs. Obviously it's easy to celebrate those, right? Make sure you celebrate them. If you have a co-founder, you have a team, like celebrate those wins. We won a big RFP with Dallas Independent School District, which is one of the biggest districts in the country, right?
Nice.
And I called my co-founder up, and I was like, we won the RFP because those things take so long to prepare. We spent like a month or like, at least a couple of weeks preparing that thing, and then we finally got it. And like they let you know months later. So
Yeah,
yeah, we finally heard about it, and we're like, yeah, 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 we got it. So we celebrated. I was like jumping up
that's
and down.
amazing, man.
Yeah, thank you.
So-
And then in terms of the lows, uh, I'd like to take a step back and just like literally like lay on my bed and just think about it for a bit because sometimes it's not as bad as you think.
Mhm.
Sometimes there's a solution. Usually there's a way around it or there's some way to handle it differently so that it's not as bad. And also sometimes the perception of how bad it is worse than it actually is. So
Yeah,
just kind
that's
of
a
grounding
great
myself.
point. That's a great point. That last part, wow, 'cause that's really what shifted my ecosystem. Because again, for me, I'm an Aquarius, so I'm either really happy or really sad. There's no in between, and so I realize now when I get into these lows, I have a mental checkpoint where I'm like, okay, is there any way in how I can make a difference, change the situation? If it's completely out of my hands, I let it go. I don't think about it ever again because it's out of my hands. And if I can do something about it, then even if it feels ridiculous, I start taking actions, and micro actions
Mm.
turn into waves of changes. And that's how I've been able to do my own thing. And I'm still learning how to meditate. My meditation is my turntables. So I jump on, for 30 minutes, get lost in music, and I'm energized and come back. But I'm
That's
glad you got
awesome.
your little technique to sort of stay in it. This is a long journey, like you said. And of all the categories, we've picked education of all businesses. But
Yeah.
there's a bunch of people, including educators and teachers and parents, that 5, 6, 8, 10, 20 years from now are going to be like, man, I remember taking classes and I saw ClassHook or I studied on Schoolio. You too? And then
Yeah.
that's when it all makes sense. You know what I mean? So, Alex,
Yeah.
thank you so
Oh,
much, man, for being so open
yeah.
and transparent today. This is going to help
Thanks.
so many listeners who are trying to figure out what to do with their journey.
Thanks so much, Tash. It's great to be here.
Okay, guys, follow Alex. All the details will be below. Alex, tell them through your own voice where to get in touch with you if you're open to some new friends.
Yeah, go to classhook.com. You can contact us through there. So that's just class and then hook, right? Put those together, classhook.com. You can also reach out to me, Alex at classhook.com. Happy to help. Always love talking to aspiring founders or current founders.
That's amazing. This episode's
Yeah,
over, but please go check out all the other episodes, and we're gonna have more amazing founders. And I'm excited that today you got to hear from Alex from ClassHook, and keep an eye on those guys, just like I would. Thanks again, Alex. We'll talk to you soon.
thanks so much.